Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Richard Ellis, and I'm here on behalf of the ALS Society of Canada, a great organization that does great work. And I'm very proud to be a board member, a donor, and in fact, a planned giving person who is involved with the ALS Society of Canada. And today it is my great pleasure to introduce Paul Nazareth. Paul's going to be our subject matter expert today, and Paul's going to teach us a lot more about planned and legacy giving. In his role as Vice President of Education and Development at the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, Paul does this work every day. And so we're really pleased that he was able to join us today. And Paul, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. A pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Paul. So why are we here today? Why are we gathering to talk about planned giving and legacy giving? Well, today, Paul and I come together to discuss what it really means to leave a legacy gift, to also discuss a little bit more about what planned giving really means, and ultimately why it can be so meaningful to an organization such as the ALS Society of Canada. So that's what we hope to accomplish during our time today. And again, Paul, we're so glad that you're here. To start off with, I guess I wanted to begin by telling a little bit of my story, my journey, if you will, how I got here. Many years ago, when I was just 40 years old, my best friend was diagnosed with ALS. And over the course of less than 2 years, she unfortunately passed away. And for those of you who have lived with ALS or are currently living with ALS and or your family and your friends, you know full well what a difficult and challenging disease this is to manage. And as I always say to people when I talk about ALS, once you have the lived experience of this disease, it leaves a mark on you, an important mark. And part of that mark is wanting to be even more helpful, to help us on our journey as together we look to eradicate this terrible disease. And so that's my connection to the cause. And that's what brought me and my partner to the idea of leaving a legacy gift to the ALS Society of Canada, so that well after we're gone, our ability to support the organization will continue into the future. And so that's why and how I kind of come to this discussion today. So with that, Paul, I thought maybe we could jump in and begin to ask you a few questions, since you are, as I say, our knowledgeable subject matter expert. And to start with, I guess I want to start at a higher level. And I want to ask you, Paul, in the simplest of terms, what does planned giving or legacy giving mean?
You know, Richard, it's often a term and a concept that people overcomplicate. You know, there's often, yes, it's about gifts of assets, and people really get lost in the math. When in the end, it is about really creating something meaningful to an individual and using whatever assets they have in this world to make that meaningful gift, something that is action-oriented, that is doing something. So whether it's a gift in a will, whether it's gifts of things like stocks, working with a financial or estate planner to enact gifts of life insurance or other things, it's really about painting a picture of meaning and then saying, how do we make that possible?
You talked about the different ways of giving. There's, of course, giving money, there's stock, there's life insurance. Some people have real estate, art collections. Maybe you've got, an antique car. What are the parameters, Paul, of how one gives? How creative can we get with our giving? Any discussion on some of those items?
The challenge is most people approach it backwards. And they think, what is it that I have to give and how will I give it? As opposed to, why am I doing this? And that's the most important thing. As I mentioned, that picture of meaning, if you don't know why you're doing something, then you won't know how you're going to do it. And the challenge with this area too is there's so many ways to do it, and people get lost in the complexity. So start with your why. and not just the organization's why, but your own very personal. And, I'd like to flip that camera around there, Richard, and ask you, a bit, you shared more about why this gift is meaningful between you and the work that ALS does. But I'd love to hear a little more about why it's meaningful to you. The idea of sharing this in life, because most people often don't. But what do you feel? What is that eternal element that gives you comfort at doing something like this?
Yeah, good question. Well, as you said, it's about the real meaning, right? And so I think when it comes to legacy or planned giving, it is very much a personally driven thing that one chooses to do. And so in my particular experience, my partner and I don't have children. And so, like many people who don't have children, you think about, I worked hard, we've done well. What do I do with all that I've accomplished, meaning financially, um, when my time comes? And how can I make a difference with what I've been able to create without leaving it to a child since I don't have them? And so for us, that decision was very easy to think about a small number of charitable organizations which touch our hearts and make us want to support. And so for us, the ALS Society of Canada was clearly number one on that list. Because as I said before, we had our very own personal experience with the disease and lost a loved one to it. So it's really, to your point about this picture of meaning, right? What does it mean? That was really the driver for us. The mechanics and how it's done, to your point, Paul, is kind of secondary. It's the meaning, the reason, the motivation that really is the most important.
It's interesting. We often, when we teach this to charitable organizations and even financial advisors, lawyers, we remind them of the importance of, in fact, not trying to do it all at once, decoupling the head and the heart. When I worked with some donors to the organization, one of the most fascinating things is that very often I would have to help clients do the self work, the work of the heart. Again, the work of the head is quite easy. That's the math stuff. But what was fascinating with people who have been touched by this organization and this disease is they come quite ready and have done a lot of self work and have a vision painted out to say, here's how we experienced it. Here's where we think there needs to be improvements, and we want to make those improvements happen. And so when you've done that self work, that self exploration, have a vision, and then that's what you bring together, heart talking to ALS so that they know what's the best structure, and then head working with your financial or estate advisor to say, okay, we've got the plan. Here's what we want to do. Here's how we want to fund it. What's the best way for our family in life and beyond to make this happen?
So for me, my own personal experience, my heart, as I say, kind of drove me to wanting to be a legacy or plan, giver to the ALS Society. But then, alas, your head kicks in, and you have to go through the process of thinking about this in many different ways. So my question for you is, when it comes to working with a third party advisor, is that something that you recommend people do? Or can I do this on my own by working just one-on-one with the folks at the ALS Society? What's the kind of the best rules of the road, Paul?
Again, I work with donors of all sizes across the country, and people start often with test gifts, with small gifts to this campaign or this area. And again, when they pick up the phone and call ALS Canada and start working together with them to say, I want to go deeper at whatever giving amount, that's where the organization has a real superpower in saying, let's figure out how to make these gifts more meaningful. And often as people move on in their ages and stages in life, we'll start moving from gifts of cash to gifts of assets. And that's when you want to make sure you consult an advisor around things like finance and tax and estate. And, a lot of people tell me, I don't want to get a lot of benefit out of this. That's not what it's about. One of the really powerful things about Canada and the government making this a beneficial thing for Canadians is that you can do more. And of course, in an estate in Canada, you can get back, use your tax credits against 100% of the income tax your estate will owe. And all of a sudden, someone goes, wow, I could never have made that kind of gift in life. But you're telling me if I give it in my estate, it's not even taking money away from my family? I'm taking away money that would have gone to taxes? Then people feel, wow, I can do more. And again, I'd love to hear from you, Richard, too, that process to say, how did you go deeper beyond just giving to getting involved up to this level of board, but how did your gift go beyond what you just did every year?
Yeah, good question. When I started down this journey, and as a couple, we decided to create a legacy giving strategy for ourselves. I did my homework. I wish I had known you then, Paul. It would have been so much easier. But I did my homework, and frankly, it was a lot of work to figure out how to do this, how to do it right. Who do you have to inform? What do I have to include in my will? So I reached out to an advisor through my investment advisor, who was able to give us some good basic information and parameters in terms of how we might make this happen. And of course, the most important thing he was able to share with us, as you just did, is the really, really significant tax advantages of getting involved in planned giving, which are, as you point out, really substantial. So that's kind of how we began our journey. But the journey doesn't end, right? So when I approached the ALS Society and told them about this planned giving strategy, we had numerous conversations. They wanted to make sure that I got all my questions answered and that I knew all of the opportunities within the society where I might want to focus my giving. So, do I want to focus on research in this kind of relentless pursuit of a um, cure to this horrible disease, or do I want to put it into family care? Because I had learned from my own firsthand knowledge how important support is for the family when one of your loved ones is diagnosed with ALS. In our case, we chose to do both. Mm-hmm. Give half of the monies that we put forward at the end of the day to research, and the other half to family and patient care. That's where it gets super meaningful, Paul, because I feel that my legacy is helping on two different levels.
Again, this is where that heart meets head to say, how do we be impactful, but how do we change people's lives? How do we make an actual difference? Now it's about what is going to be the most impactful thing. This is in a lot of ways the future of philanthropy in Canada, that customized, bespoke model to say, where does head and heart meet? What can you do? What do you want to do? And in fact, we see people making a bigger difference and feeling like it's meaningful when we stop asking the questions of the charity, what do you need? To us having a conversation to say, let's talk about the process. Where do we see problems and solutions, and what could we do together?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is this: there are kind of two ways of getting really involved in a legacy giving strategy. There's the do it myself route, work directly with the organization, say, hey, here's my plan. I've got this in writing. I've included this in my will. This is what you can expect from me, in due course. The other one is to use that advisor who can really help you with some of the details. If I use an advisor, is that expensive for me now? Or is it expensive for my family once I'm gone? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question because, it doesn't have to be expensive today. Although, a good lawyer will always tell you you'll pay us some up front now, or you'll pay more money for everybody to fight over it later. So part of it is in 2021, we've got such a spectrum of advisorship. We are also kind of living in a golden age of what does an advisor mean? I was just talking to a team, Canadian Legal Wills, who they've done tens of thousands of wills this past year because of the pandemic. and have a very high percentage of charitable bequests tied to it, but their community is people under 30. Young professionals who want to use robo advisors, don't want to talk to somebody, want to use their phone, and are not at an age and stage really of looking at this in the face or understanding it. They're just doing it so that they can protect their family, think about assets, etc. So, I would say that, go to the type of advisor that meets your age and stage of life and your age and stage of assets. If you've got things that you want to protect and you want to make sure are properly thought of after you go, then you want to engage an advisor at that level. So we've also got to think of it that way to say, again, financial planners are there to help us exponentially make sure we're protected in life. And estate planners are there to make sure we're comfortable and also create as little challenges for our family and heirs beyond.
Yeah.
So, matching to age and stage is very important. And today it can be completely done affordably.
So is it, if I really dumb it down, because that's what I need, Paul, is it as easy as for me to include in my actual will that I want 25% of my estate net value to go to the ALS Society of Canada? Does that get it done?
Truly, if you go to an estate planner and say, this is my intention, and you've gleaned on a really helpful thing here, because often people will think of dollar amounts, and in the end most people can't visualize what we're actually worth. An estate is essentially a garage sale where everything you have on earth is sold, and there's no estate tax in Canada, it's income tax. So everything you have is sold and there's tax on that income, even if it's transitioning to heirs. And so all you got to do is let your estate planner know, and percentages are a great way to think about it. The key thing is to start.
Yeah. And that, I would say that's a good descriptor of my own personal experience. I was worried about it. I'm not going to lie. I thought this is going to take a lot of work. It's going to cost me a bunch of money up front, but it's important to me, so I'm willing to do it. So while the work was there in terms of more the, as you said, the picture of the meaning, the heart and the head, the real work was on the heart side, deciding what we wanted to support. The actual head side, getting it done, wasn't that hard at all, because organizations like the ALS Society are very good at this today, and B, there's an infrastructure, whether that's through your lawyer, through your investment banker, through, whatever, to make sure that you can get to the right specialist that can help you. So that's very much in line with my thinking and my own experience. But for the folks out there, maybe that haven't delved into this yet, Paul, what would you say, where's the best place to simply start?
Again, often age and stage, where are you in your family and business life and those different areas? And it's really just, pick up the phone or send the email. I've got a couple of state lawyers, and I went on their site and they said, start with a text and we'll give you a quote. And again, most people, it's important to know that it's never going to cost nothing, but it's often going to cost less and take way less time than you thought it. But again, there's tools out there. It's just starting the conversation. Again, ALS is blessed as an organization to have invested in the support to make this easy. You can go right online and find the wording. You can contact the team and they can help you with this. And then again, in every part of Canada, you can find a local estate planner through a estate planning council, a provincial bar association, or law society. Honest to goodness, Google it. Estate planning in your city, and there are people that are experts in this that can help you. And with ALS, again, they can give you the instructions to give to an estate planner to make this easy.
The other one that I know is very popular, a lot of people do, is with regards to your life insurance policy. So here's a bunch of money that you've been putting, every month or however, every year, putting money towards your life insurance policy. And it's money that at the end of the day, you're not going to use because you're no longer going to be here. And so if you're in a position as a family or as a couple where you might not need that life insurance funds at the end of the day, it's really easy to use your life insurance policy as a plan giving donation. Is that correct? And secondly, is there tax savings that come from that?
Indeed. And in Canada, you don't have to give it all away. You can assign a charity as a multiple beneficiary. So half can be going to your family and another part can be going to charity. Lots of options.
So I guess the other thing I would encourage people to do, and I'd like your thoughts on this, Paul, is whatever you do, make sure that you let the organization that you choose to support know that you choose to support them so that they can steward you. They can keep you abreast of what's happening within the organization so that you can continue down your learning track with the organization, which makes giving even that more personally impactful.
And this is the challenge. Many people who do this don't often tell the organization because they're concerned they're going to be asked for more money or that kind of thing. And again, when you have professionals at the organization like ALS who run these kind of programs, their biggest concern is just saying thanks. When it comes to ALS, the science has evolved. The practice and support in Canada has evolved. So all they want to do is keep in touch with you to let you know where the areas you're supporting them have also evolved. And so they meet you where you are. And again, it feels so much more deep to know that you're part of the solution.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about when it comes to going deep, there are opportunities with legacy giving to truly make it a personal legacy. And when I say that, I mean, you can name it, right? So I can name my legacy gift to the ALS Society of Canada in honor of my friend that passed away 25 years ago from this horrible disease and who brought me into the broader ALS community. That way, her legacy, through my legacy of giving, her legacy of teaching me and others through her journey with ALS lives on into perpetuity. For me, that's a really foundational, heartfelt opportunity that legacy giving provides me and her family.
And there's stories to tell. This is another piece too. The gift is one thing, but those lessons that she taught you, and we ask people, share the story, especially when it's in memory. But again, when we band together with family, friends, community, there's no limit. And again, heart and head is not a plus, it's a multiplier. When you get fired up about doing more, you talk to an advisor about how we do it, you talk to the ALS team about why we do it, you'll almost every time be able to do multiplications 10 times as much with what you have today. In fact, again, this kind of philanthropy is also part of the healing process to create something of meaning over here while we're also trying to work out what this all means over here. And they can be part of the same thing.
Yeah. And as you say, the perfect time to give is today, right? And when I look at the mission and the mandate of the ALS Society of Canada, I see all of the amazing opportunities where an individual's giving can help truly change the trajectory of where we are with this disease. Research. I mean, we do some of the best, brightest, and most impactful research anywhere in the world on this disease right here in Canada. And so when people make a donation or a legacy gift to the ALS Society of Canada and they steward it towards research, you can make a massive difference. We talked earlier about how you can help support families in need during their time of crisis with this disease. This is critically important to families. And so whether you want to, again, give with your head or your heart once you decide to give, with organizations like the ALS Society of Canada, they make that really easy. And all you have to do to find out more information, and to your point, Google it. So www.als.ca/legacy. It's all there. And there's all kinds of resources to help you. Before we close things off, I want to turn it back over to you to make sure that we've touched upon everything related to legacy or planned giving that you want to talk about. Is there anything else that you want to offer?
The biggest thing, and this is the work that I do across the country, talking to Canadians, talking to advisors and charities, is that, again, we just overthink it. Start with the heart, let it go to the head when the planning needs to happen, but start today. again, pick up the phone, send the email, just start the conversation. The conversation costs nothing. Start exploring the will plan, start exploring talking to the organization, make it easy on yourself. We make things too hard on ourselves, and just start it today, and it will be that much more beneficial, and it'll feel better and they'll feel better. So I hope we've shared some information that'll help folks in this. And thank you to the ALS team for inviting the Canadian Association of Gift Planners to add the knowledge we have to this conversation.
So, Paul, I want to thank you on behalf of the ALS Society of Canada, all of our members, and importantly, all of our individuals and our families who are living with ALS, because what you've shared with us today will no doubt help us into the future. And so your subject matter expertise is much appreciated. And for those of you listening today, for anybody who would like to learn more about how you can make a planned or legacy gift, or frankly, any other gift you'd like to make, at the ALS Society of Canada, we will be your grateful recipients. And you can find out more at www.als.ca/legacy. Paul, thank you again. Have a good remainder of the day. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us.